Tell me, when was the last time silence scared you? Another beat of quiet. The room holds its breath. Not the silence of an empty room, not the awkward pause in a conversation. I mean the kind of silence that presses, the kind that comes from someone who could speak but chooses not to because they're too busy winning. See the loudest people in the room? They're begging you to listen. But the dangerous ones, the ones who own the future, they're silent. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they're too busy proving it. Pulls back, lets the tension hang. Then, let me show you why quiet is the most powerful sound you'll ever hear. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, everyone. Let me start with a simple question. When was the last time you truly listened? Not to reply, not to impress, but to learn. Today, I want to talk to you about a powerful tool that many ignore: silence. Yes, silence. Something so simple, so underestimated, yet so incredibly powerful that it can shape your future. We live in a noisy world. Everyone wants to talk. Everyone wants to be seen. People post their plans before they act. They announce their goals before they even begin. But let me tell you something. The most successful people are not the loudest in the room. They're the most focused. When you're silent, you're not inactive. You're observing. You're learning. You're strategizing. You're not distracted by applause. You're preparing for results. You see, I've met two kinds of people in life. One who talks a lot and achieves little, and one who talks less and achieves more. Guess which one owns the future? Let me share something real with you. When I started out, people laughed at my ideas. They doubted my ability. And I had two choices: argue with them or prove them wrong. I chose the second. Why? Because silence is not surrender. Silence is strategy. Sometimes you don't need to explain yourself. Let your actions speak. Let your consistency be the argument. Let your progress be the punchline. Remember this: when you shout, people hear you once, but when you succeed, they listen forever. So my message to you is simple: be silent when they doubt you. Be silent when they mock you. Be silent when they expect you to fail. And while you're silent, work, grow, get stronger. And when the time comes, and it will come, let your results speak so loud, the whole world will listen. In a world that constantly demands expression, noise has become currency. People often associate silence with insecurity or fear, as if staying quiet is a sign of weakness or ignorance. But that assumption couldn't be more wrong. Silence, when intentional, is one of the most powerful strengths a person can cultivate. It is not the silence of avoidance, but the silence of observation, preparation, and control. Think of the strongest structures in nature: the mountains, the deep ocean, the night sky. They don't announce themselves. They don't seek attention, yet their power is undeniable. True strength doesn't come from shouting the loudest. It comes from standing firm without needing approval. And that kind of strength is born in silence. When you are silent, you begin to listen not just to others, but to yourself. You begin to hear your own doubts, fears, dreams, and instincts with clarity. Most people can't do that. They're so busy reacting, defending, and explaining that they never actually understand what's going on inside them or around them. Silence gives you that advantage. It opens space for reflection. It gives you the power to pause in a fast-moving world. And in that pause, you grow. You start to notice the behaviors of others more clearly. You recognize patterns in business, in relationships, in failure and success. When you're quiet, you catch what others miss. That insight becomes your power. The loud ones may be seen in the moment, but the silent ones are the ones building empires behind the scenes. Think about those who train in secret: the athlete who wakes up at 4:00 a.m. to run before the world even opens its eyes, the coder building a game-changing app while everyone else scrolls on their phones, the student who studies quietly while their peers laugh at the library. These people aren't weak because they're silent. They're dangerous. They're preparing, and the world only sees them when they're ready to deliver impact. Silence also builds emotional discipline, the ability to hold your tongue when someone doubts you. the patience to let criticism pass by without letting it derail your focus, the wisdom to keep your vision to yourself until it's solid. These are not easy things. Weak people lash out, seek validation, and react quickly. Strong people know when to speak, and more importantly, when not to. You don't have to announce your goals to everyone. You don't have to defend your dreams every time someone questions them. In fact, the more you talk, the more you give away your energy. Silence keeps your power contained. It's like holding fire inside your hands. You're not wasting it on noise. You're saving it for the right moment to burn through obstacles. Most people fail not because they lacked ability, but because they gave too much away too soon. They exposed their plans. They let opinions distract them. They talked so much about what they were going to do that they never did it. Silence protects you from that trap. It forces you to act rather than perform. And let's not ignore this truth. Silence can be a shield in tough times. When things aren't going your way, staying silent helps you avoid unnecessary judgment. You're not making excuses. You're not trying to justify failure. You're simply regrouping, rebuilding. You're doing the hard work in private, where it matters. When you emerge, you don't come back with explanations. You come back with results. That's what real strength looks like. Not noise, not attention, control, focus, discipline, restraint. Silence is not the absence of voice. It's the presence of intention. It is the space where growth happens, where transformation begins, and where the foundation for lasting success is quietly, steadily built. The smartest move is not always the fastest one. In a world obsessed with speed, people rush to act, to speak, to win. They rush because they're afraid someone else will get there first. But in that rush, they miss the most important part of the process: observation. Willpower doesn't come from being first, it comes from being right. And being right requires that you watch, listen, and understand before you move. There's a reason the best chess players don't move impulsively. They study the board. They anticipate. They learn their opponent's rhythm. Only after they've absorbed the situation do they make a move. That's not hesitation, it's precision. That's not fear, it's strategy. In life, business, and relationships, this same principle applies. Observe first, strike later. Observation gives you an edge. It shows you where others are making mistakes. It reveals opportunities hidden in plain sight. When you are the one watching instead of speaking, learning instead of showing off, you gain access to layers that loud, fast movers never see. The ones who strike too early often strike the wrong target. They make noise but not impact. They make movement but not progress. Think of a lion in the wild. It doesn't roar before the hunt. It doesn't chase every animal it sees. It waits. It blends in. It studies the environment. It senses weakness. And when the moment is right, only then it explodes into action. That one well-timed strike feeds the That's the power of observation. It's not about being passive. It's about knowing when to be active. We often feel pressure to prove ourselves quickly, to reply immediately, to act fast, to be seen. But speed without information leads to failure. You can't fix what you don't understand. You can't lead what you haven't studied. You can't win a game you haven't watched closely enough to understand the rules. Observation is the foundation of effective action. In business, the most disruptive companies aren't always the first movers. They're often the ones who let others go first, who watch the mistakes, who learn what customers actually want and then deliver it better. They let the market reveal its flaws, and then they act not to compete, but to dominate. In relationships, the person who observes becomes emotionally intelligent. They understand what people need, what people hide, and what they respond to. They can manage tension, build trust, and influence outcomes. Not because they talk well, but because they read well. They study behavior. They listen deeply. And then, when the time comes, they say exactly what needs to be said, no more, no less. This is not a skill for the impatient. It takes strength to watch in silence while others show off. It takes humility to let the moment pass because it's not the right one. It takes discipline to resist the urge to move just to feel busy, But this patience is not wasted time, it's preparation. Every second spent observing is a second sharpening your weapon. Every delay is loading your mind with intelligence that will be used with devastating accuracy when the time is right. You cannot afford to strike blindly. You only have so much energy, so much time, so much opportunity. One wrong move in the wrong direction can cost you more than you think, but one right move at the right time can change everything. That's why you wait. That's why you watch. Because when you strike, it has to count. People will try to rush you. They'll try to get a reaction. They'll mistake your silence for uncertainty. But while they talk, you're thinking. While they show, you're studying. While they move, you're mapping the entire field. And by the time they realize what you've seen, it's already too late for them to respond. There's a voice inside everyone that wants to be recognized, that wants applause, that wants to be validated and seen. That voice is your ego, and if you're not careful, it will speak louder than your effort, louder than your progress, and louder than your actual results. Ego wants attention now. But real growth, real mastery, that takes time. And it doesn't happen in front of an audience. It happens in silence, in the grind, in the background. That's where results are born. Not in ego, but in execution. Ego pushes people to talk before they've built anything, to claim things before they've earned them, to make noise before their substance. But the world doesn't remember who spoke first. It remembers who finished strong. Results are undeniable. They are quiet, but they echo. When you have results, you don't need to defend yourself. You don't need to argue. You don't need to prove your worth to anyone, because your success proves it for you. Look around. Most people spend more energy promoting their ambition than achieving it. They tell everyone what they're going to do. They post about their plans. They talk about being on the grind. But the people who actually win don't talk that much. They don't need to. They let their work do the talking. Their consistency is louder than their statements. Their outcome speaks louder than their opinions. There's a reason why the most respected people in any field are rarely the ones bragging. They're not caught up in proving themselves. They're too busy improving themselves. That's the difference. Ego looks outward, it craves recognition, but results look inward. They focus on discipline, correction, repetition, and performance. Ego is temporary, results are permanent. And the truth is, ego can cost you everything. When you let your pride speak louder than your progress, you become blind to your flaws. You stop listening. You stop learning. You believe you're already there when you're just getting started. That kind of thinking destroys potential. It makes you fragile because the moment you face criticism or failure, ego crumbles. But when your foundation is built on actual results, no one can shake you. You've already proven yourself. Not with words, but with outcomes. Think about it like this. Ego is noise. Results are proof, and in the long run, proof wins. No one can argue with a track record. You don't need to shout when you've delivered. You don't need to respond to every challenge or opinion. When people see the results, they know who you are, without you having to say a word. This mindset also protects your focus. When you're not driven by ego, you stop comparing yourself to everyone else. You stop chasing applause. You stop trying to be the loudest in the room. Instead, you focus on what matters: growth, value, consistency, delivery. You start to understand that success is not about being seen, it's about being remembered. And the only thing people remember over time is impact. You never hear the loudest voice win a marathon. You never see a champion talking during the fight. Winners don't talk while they're building. They're too locked in, too focused, too dialed in on the work. It's only when the work is done, when the record is set, the goal is reached, the mission is completed, that people stop and take notice. Letting your results speak is not about being passive. It's about being intentional. It's about putting your energy where it counts, into action, not validation, into building something real, not just saying something loud. It's not humility out of weakness. It's confidence rooted in evidence. The kind of confidence that doesn't need applause to keep going, because it already knows where it's going and what it's capable of. One of the most exhausting habits people develop is trying to control everything around them. Situations, outcomes, people's opinions, other people's actions, timing, even chaos. They think if they just push hard enough, argue long enough, or manipulate cleverly enough, they can bend the world to their will. But the truth is, the world isn't yours to control. What is yours? The only thing that ever truly is your energy, your attention, and your response. Trying to control everything outside yourself is not only impossible, it's a trap. The more you chase it, the more burned out and distracted you become. Your mind gets filled with noise, you get reactive, you lose clarity. And worst of all, you stop making progress on the things that are actually in your hands. Energy is like currency. You only have so much of it in a day. Spend it trying to change what you can't control, and you'll never have enough left to master what you can. Control your energy. That's the secret. Learn how to protect it, how to direct it, how to keep it focused. Every time you engage in drama, gossip, unnecessary arguments, or obsessive thinking about things beyond your influence, you give away energy that could have been invested into your goals, your craft, your peace, or your growth. Most people don't lack time or talent, they lack control over their own energy. They drain themselves chasing things that were never their responsibility in the first place. Look at high performers in any field, athletes, entrepreneurs, artists, leaders. They have one thing in common: energy, discipline. They don't respond to every opinion. They don't waste their mental space complaining about what others are doing. They don't try to fight every battle. They focus on their lane. They know that their performance is not a product of perfect conditions. It's a product of how well they protect and apply their energy. You can't control how other people behave, but you can control how much of your mind you give to their behavior. You can't control the economy, but you can control how you prepare, adapt, and respond. You can't control the timing of everything in life, but you can control what you do with the time you have today. That shift from external to internal is where real strength begins. Too many people confuse movement with progress. They're constantly busy, constantly involved in everything, thinking it makes them productive. But being everywhere is not the same as being effective. Sometimes doing less is smarter, saying less is wiser, engaging less is braver. The point is not to shut out the world, it's to stop trying to dominate it and start mastering yourself within it. There's always going to be noise. There's always going to be problems you didn't expect, people who doubt you, critics who misunderstand you, and setbacks that test you. But those aren't the problem. The real danger is how much of your energy they steal from what actually matters. You only get one mind, one body, one reservoir of focus every single day. It's not unlimited. And what you feed grows. If you feed distraction, you grow scattered. If you feed outrage, you grow reactive. If you feed insecurity, you grow dependent on control. But if you feed focus, you grow powerful. If you feed discipline, you grow unstoppable. The world is too big and too chaotic for anyone to manage. But your inner world, your habits, your reactions, your effort, your self-awareness, that's your territory. That's the space you were meant to master. And the irony is, the more you learn to control your energy, the more the world begins to respond to you in different ways, not because the world changed, but because you did. When you stop fighting everything outside and start refining everything inside, your actions carry more weight. Your words have more calm. Your presence feels different. You start showing up with clarity, not confusion. With purpose, not pressure. Real growth doesn't happen in the spotlight. It doesn't happen when people are clapping, watching, or liking your posts. It happens behind closed doors, in silence, in solitude, in repetition. It happens in the moments where no one is paying attention. No cameras, no applause, no validation. Just you, your effort, your mistakes, and your discipline. That's where the real work begins. That's where transformation starts to take shape. In a world obsessed with visibility, people confuse attention with progress. They believe if they're not being seen, they're not moving forward. But that's the illusion. The best progress is often invisible. The most important work is the work you do when nobody knows you're doing it. Because in that space, There's no pressure to perform, only a responsibility to improve. Growth is deeply personal. It's not about putting on a show. It's about changing who you are at the core. It's about refining your mindset, upgrading your habits, sharpening your skills, and building the kind of foundation that can't be shaken. And that kind of transformation doesn't need to be shared before it's ready. It doesn't need an audience. It needs consistency. Nobody sees you waking up early to learn something new. Nobody sees the nights you spend battling self-doubt or pushing through frustration. They don't see the pages you've written, erased, and rewritten. They don't see the workouts, the rejection emails, the small wins you don't announce. But all of that matters, every bit of it. That's your real resume, the version the world doesn't see until much later. We live in a culture that tells you to post every step, every move, every update. But the truth is, the more you share prematurely, the more pressure you create, the more external noise you invite. And sometimes that noise distracts you from the real goal. Growth isn't about impressing people while you're still in the process. It's about becoming someone who doesn't need to impress anyone, because the results speak loud enough. There's power in previously, not secrecy, but previously, a sense of purpose that doesn't demand recognition, a level of maturity where you're not chasing applause, just chasing excellence. The most grounded individuals don't seek validation for the steps they're taking. They trust the process. They let the work accumulate in silence. They know that if they keep showing up, the impact will take care of itself. And that impact, that's what the world eventually sees. That's when people start asking, how did you get so good? Or where did this come from? But they don't realize it didn't come from one big leap. It came from 1,000 quiet days, 1,000 invisible steps. That public impact was built on a private mountain of effort. No one will ever fully understand. You don't need to prove your growth, you need to continue it. You don't need to convince others of how far you've come, you need to keep going. Because the moment will arrive when everything you've been building, refining, and mastering in the dark will be impossible to ignore. Not because you said so, but because the results, the presence, the depth, they will speak volumes without a single word from you. That's the balance, private struggle, public strength. Private progress, public power. The deeper your roots grow in silence, the taller you can rise when it's time to be seen. But the mistake people make is trying to rise too soon, trying to be noticed before they're ready. They put on a version of themselves that hasn't been earned yet, and when the spotlight comes, they collapse under the pressure they were never prepared to handle. The real ones know growth is a commitment you make quietly, and impact is the reward that arrives loudly. In conclusion, silence is not emptiness, it is preparation. In a world addicted to noise, those who remain silent are often misunderstood, but they are the ones sharpening their vision, cultivating discipline, and building resilience where it matters most. Silence is not weakness, it's strategy. It's the calm before the impact. When you stay silent, you observe more, you learn more, and you waste less energy on the things that don't move you forward. You become harder to provoke, harder to distract, and impossible to break. You stop reacting to everything and start acting with purpose. You stop announcing every move and start letting your results become the loudest part of your story. Silence is the shield of the focused and the weapon of the wise. While others shout for attention, you stay grounded. While they chase validation, you build value. And in time, when your work is ready, the world will notice. Not because you demanded recognition, but because your excellence made it impossible to ignore. Be silent, not because you have nothing to say, but because what you're becoming is louder than any words you could speak. When you master silence, you won't have to chase success, it will come looking for you. Ladies and gentlemen, silence is not emptiness. It is power in its purest form. It is the unshakable discipline of the focused, the quiet strength of the wise, and the unseen force behind every great achievement. While the world chases noise, remember this: the loudest voices fade, but true impact echoes forever. Your success doesn't need an audience, it needs action. Your growth doesn't need applause, it needs consistency. And your legacy won't be measured by how much you said, but by what you built when no one was watching. So let them talk, let them doubt, let them rush. You stay silent, you stay working, and when the time comes, let your results roar so loudly that the world has no choice but to lean in and listen. Because in the end, silence isn't just what you don't say, it's what your success screams. Thank you.